Hey everybody, it is Andy coming back at you again with another Cube update video. This is a really quick little update right before Boston Cube Party to Sacred Geometry. This is my cube that is all about elegant cards and a bunch of simple individual game pieces that combine hopefully to make more complex, nuanced game states and board states and decisions, but individual cards gotta be simple. That is the rules for how they get in. So I am bringing in Selfless Spirit. Very clean, 2-mana, 2/1 flyer, sacrifice it to give creatures indestructible to end of turn. I think right now the board wipes are probably quite strong in this cube. A side effect of playing only creatures that are elegant and clean and simple and only do one thing is that most of them don't provide any value in the face of a board wipe. There's not a lot of other types of value cards are generating because a lot of the things that are really good in the face of removal tend to have a lot of complexity and layers and drawing cards and all that stuff. So that is something I think is currently a weak spot of the cube. I'm also not playing any planeswalkers or any vehicles, which are other things that are good against board wipes. So I think probably after Boston Cube Party, there'll be some more work that will have to be done to give, especially the mid-range decks, like the green-white mid-range decks or the green-red mid-range decks, more tools against board wipes. But for now, Selfless Spirit is an easy add that is going to make that a little better for at least the white decks. Ulcerate, nothing to say here. 1 mana, instant speed, -3/-3, you lose 3 life. Super clean. Should have been in there from the beginning. Don't know why I overlooked it. I'm also putting Goblin Guide in. Not this disgusting version, but a reasonable version. It's a simple card. It's somewhat iconic. I do think there's something inelegant about the trigger you have to remember. It's a little bit clunky. And we'll see how I feel about it long term. But I do want to give aggro just a little nudge, a little push. And I'm a little light on red creatures right now. So you'll see I've brought in a couple of those. So Goblin Guide gets the nod. Electrostatic Infantry, again, very straightforward. 2 mana, 1/2 trample. Whenever you cast instant or sorcery spell, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Dead simple. And the other thing about the sort of limitation of this cube, trying to keep things elegant and simple, I also have a pretty strong restriction on the number of unique tokens I'll allow myself to run. And a lot of the payoffs for spell slinging tend to be tokens. You basically have prowess creatures and tokens. And a lot of the prowess creatures are pretty complicated too, so Electrostatic Infantry is nice because it'll bolster like a spell slinging payoff, which is like a deck I love. I love decks that are rewarded for playing a bunch of spells, and this is a way to do that with a very clean card, of which there aren't a ton of good examples. So Infantry gets the nod. I love Avaricious Dragon. This was one of the first cards I put in this cube list years ago when I first made it. I was like, I want a cube where I can play Avaricious Dragon. At some point I cut it. I can't exactly remember why. It was still the early stages of like moving cards around, trying to figure stuff out. But it's coming back in. I got back into Magic around Origins, and Avaricious Dragon was one of the first Mythic Rares I ever opened. Maybe the first Mythic Rare I ever opened. And I thought it was just so cool. And I was right. To this day, it is still very, very cool. So that's coming back in. It's also, a dragon. Dragons are cool. They're an iconic creature type. The discarding could be very synergistic with some of the things that are going on. So yeah, Avaricious Dragon. I don't know why I cut it. So it's getting in there. A couple of cards that we're still in the sort of stage with this cube, but there's going to be some somewhat obvious adds. Ulcerate seems pretty obvious. Selfless Spirit, like these are Electrostatic Infantry. These are pretty straightforward. And Avaricious Dragon should have never been cut. And so we're still at that stage where I'm still kind of having dumb realizations about cards that I should have been playing since the beginning or should have never cut. Cards I did cut to make room for these. Seven's Reclamation is a beloved card of mine. It's powerful. It's also complicated given that the flashback has different effects depending on whether it's been cast for the first time or flashbacked. It's also kind of in an uncanny valley space with Unburial Rites. It's very similar, but they're not the same. They're different in substantial ways. It's also pretty wordy, so it's got a lot of words on it. One of the main pieces of feedback from a recent draft of this cube on Tuesday was just that I felt like there was a lot of recursion, and I think ultimately people were probably right, and so this is the one that was least elegant, and so out it comes. Fatal Push. Oh, this version too. I was sort of overlooking this initially because it is relatively iconic in my mind. I think a lot of medium and franchise players know what Fatal Push does, but if we're honest with ourselves and just separate ourselves from any sort of iconic history of Fatal Push, it is so clunky, so complicated. It was the only card in the entire cube with Revolt, and the Revolt is complicated, and some people have to double check the reminder text of Revolt. Like, does it have to be under my control, or can it be under my opponent's control? Does it have to be a creature? Can it be anything else? It's just got to go. I said earlier, I've been updating my sort of cube description, and the way I'm describing my approach towards complexity in this cube is that I really want to avoid complexity on simple, cheap, low-impact cards. A simple 1-for-1 removal spell should not be complicated, and so Fatal Push gets the boot. Where I am okay with more complexity is on big swingy threats, sort of splashier cards, and just a 1-mana removal spell should not be that. So Ulcerate is a clear upgrade here in terms of the goals for this cube. I think maybe I'm on a few too many removal spells right now just because I love them, and Ulcerate makes it a little harder for control decks just to fill their deck with removal and, buy time to the late game, because it does cost you 3 life, which is real. Raven's Crime is coming out for now, at least. This is a card that... Here's why I think Raven's Crime is elegant. I'll make the case for it being elegant first, and we'll talk about why maybe it's not elegant. My case for the elegance of Raven's Crime is that you are always trading a card for a card. Raven's Crime is 1 card for your opponent's card, and then you just get to choose to pay a black mana, discard another card. It's always got to be a land, because that's how Retrace works. Discard a land card, and always sort of play this game. And the fact that it's always sort of perfectly symmetrical and equal, I think makes it really cool and really dynamic, because you get to try and figure out how to break that symmetry. It also obviously has a lot of synergies, most notably in this cube with Drakehaven and Archfiend of Ifnir being able to proc this numerous times on your turn potentially, and many, many times over the course of the game is quite strong. Now, the case for it being inelegant is obviously that it has Retrace. It's the only card in the queue with Retrace, which I think goes without saying. Retrace is not a popular mechanic. It has not been printed on very many cards, and it is not super intuitive. The name Retrace does not imply that anything about lands or even discarding. It just implies you can do this again, but nothing about sort of how you make that happen. Compared to something like Unearth, for example. Like Unearth, the sort of resonance of the name of that mechanic to what actually happens, you get to bring this thing back. It's much more sort of clear. Not that this is a criticism of the design team. I don't know what I would call this. I'm not sure there is a better name for sort of what this effect is, but it's not perfectly elegant. So for now, I'm going to cut it, and maybe I'll find room for it in the future, or maybe I'll design another cube that Raven's Crime is a better home for. So the last 2 cuts here are just ones that are not very exciting, nor particularly good. Battling Mystic, Daniel on Tuesday had a deck with Drakehaven and a lot of other sort of madness spells, like a blue-red discard deck. Was playing Battling Mystic, and at the end of the night told me, this card was really good. And I was like, oh, awesome. And he was like, yeah, I never kicked it. I just played it as a 2-mana 2/1 flyer. And I was like, okay, well, that's certainly not what I intend here. So if that deck couldn't make use of this kicker, then I imagine it will come up very infrequently. So this is basically a, distractedly complex 2-mana 2/1 flyer. So out it comes. And Beetleback Chief is a card that is very elegant. It's very straightforward, very simple, but even I have to admit, it does not spark joy. So, this is where, again, the complexity budget is the thing that's under consideration at every point, because Beetleback Chief definitely simpler than, for example, Siege Gang Commander, but Siege Gang Commander, it's a 5-mana token-making finisher. I think it's totally okay to have an additional activated ability that makes it a little bit less clean, but makes it a much more fun game piece. And it's where I'm willing to spend my complexity budget, is on cards like Siege Gang Commander over cards like Beetleback Chief. Bless me. So, those are the last couple changes right before Boston Cube Party. If you'll be at the event, I hope you get a chance to draft the cube if you're interested. And afterwards, I expect to have a big, long video reviewing all of the results of all of the deck lists from that event, and talking about what will probably be a big, huge, sweeping swath of changes. I already have a bunch of cards I've been thinking about wanting to add, but don't own in paper yet, so I'll have to order them before I can get them in. And I'm sure I'll get a lot of great feedback from people. And also just, the process of putting it in front of a bunch of people is going to be very clarifying. I'll see somebody, draft seasons past, and I'll be like, oh, how would I ever convincing myself this fit here? So, yeah, stay tuned for that video, and I'll keep these coming. Like, subscribe, comment below, etc., etc.